Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush will fight as early as June 11th. Charles is going for the belt and Beneil is also going for the belt. Is this a wild mismatch or will it be a very competitive fight? Hello fighters, here's World of MMA, and in this video we're going to break down the Charles vs Beneil fight. Here we go. In this breakdown, we'll take apart the biography of the fighters, the backstory of the fight, then we'll take apart the skills of the fighters. And then we're gonna talk about who's gonna win. So let's begin. Charles Oliveira was born October 17, 1989, in the city of Guarulhos, São Paulo State, Brazil. At the age of 12 he began seriously studying Brazilian jiu-jitsu. In 2003 won his first competitions held among white belts. In the aftermath he received the black belt in jiu-jitsu from the hands of the trainer Erickson Cardoso and Jorge Patina. Beneil Dariush was born on May 6, 1989. He is of Assyrian descent. In the consequences he moved to the USA permanently. In 2007 he started to practice Brazilian jiu-jitsu seriously. Became the world champion among blue, purple and brown belts. 5 years later he was awarded the black belt, receiving it from the hands of Brazilian master Romulo Barral. Also for some time practiced Thai boxing. After we went over the biography of the fighters, let's discuss the background of this fight. After Charles Oliveira lost his fight to Islam Makhachev at UFC 280, Charles was offered a rematch with Islam Makhachev. But Charles Oliveira declined, and in January it was announced that Oliveira would go out for a challenger fight with Beneil Dariush. Nothing happened until April, but then the news came out that Oliveira was out due to injury, and the UFC decided the fight would be moved to June 11th. Beneil said in a recent interview that Charles is not that loaded for the fight, and Dariush himself said that he wants Dustin Poirier to ensure the fight. But today the Poirier vs Gaethje fight was officially announced, so I think Charles will go out for the fight. Since right now, nothing is a foretaste of trouble for this fight to happen, we come to a very interesting aspect of the fight: punching technique. Charles Oliveira, who has good Thai boxing and has very good striking technique, very diverse and also very many cool kicks that he can throw in the fight. But there is one huge and fat disadvantage. Charles is his weak jaw hold, and on a more or less normal hit to the jaw, Charles Oliveira goes down for a knockdown and then the fight is over. Beneil is a very underrated puncher, who may not have the best technique, but he has a very strong punching power and can knock out anyone with a single punch, which can be very bad for Charles. Charles, when he misses a lot, which is what we're used to, Charles falls on his back and defends from there. But what happens if Beneil gets really hard on his punches and chops Charles so hard that there's no way to get there? There's always a chance for that, and it's not small. But to sum up the punching technique in general, Charles Oliveira is a slight favorite, because of the variety of techniques and bigger kicks. And we get to the fun part, the wrestling and the BJJ. Charles Oliveira is a very elite wrestler. But not as a wrestler, but more as a grappler, and he's doing well with that. As a grappler it transfers poorly, but sooner or later Charles can transfer. But also don't forget that Charles has very good work from the back and even better than the offense. Elbows, Tony-style submissions, he's very good at it. He's very good at BJJ. Most of Oliveira's wins are due to submissions, which allows him to win. That Charles is probably one of the best grapplers in the UFC, that's 100%. Because if Oliveira goes for a submission, he's likely to do it. So Beneil Dariush, a very tough wrestler, and in his throws, transfers, Beneil is even better than Charles, and I think he has better control on top too. Because he's less of a jitser and more of a top grappler, and Beneil can even control tightly underneath. Beneil is very good at BJJ, as he can often do submissions and get the win. To sum it all up, Charles Oliveira is a slight favorite in wrestling and in BJJ. But a small one, as both are very strong in that aspect, and we move on to the experience of endurance and mentality. This is where things get extremely interesting. Charles Oliveira's experience is strong because he's been through a lot of title fights and has also been through a lot of fights themselves. So Charles has been in the UFC for over 12 years, and that's quite a long time. Beneil Dariush is also very good and has been in the UFC and fighting for a very long time. But there is one thing that Beneil is inferior to Charles in. It's in the title fights. Yes, the fight is not a title fight, but the experience that Charles has had will be very important. Charles isn't much clearer in stamina. Since Charles didn't go any farther than the third round, but a 3-round fight means a lot too. But if you look at the big picture, Oliveira is doing well with stamina, and at a high tempo he can also do fights and not get tired at the same time. Dariush is not much better, plus or minus the same as Charles Oliveira. He doesn't go further than 3 rounds, so he's not much better. Mentally, Charles is just really good. Yeah, he used to give up. But that was a long time ago. Now Oliveira is a mentally unkillable fighter, and it's impossible to break Charles mentally, I'm sure of that. Beneil Dariush is also good mentally and can also take fighters hard and not break. If you sum it all up generally, the slight favorite is Charles in experience, stamina and mentally. Yes, I always pick Charles as the winner in this breakdown, and I'll tell you why I think so. I think the fight will start with a little reconnaissance. Charles will go ahead and clinch, and by the 3rd round Oliveira will sub and win. That's probably as likely as possible. What do you think, folks? Write your opinions in the comments.